Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mastering Midlife, How to Thrive When the World Asks the Most of You. I am your host, Mark Silverman. Today I have one of my best friends for the last decade or so, Fred Jefferson III. He's the Senior Vice President of Jefferson and Associates, a consulting and executive coaching firm that's focused on the necessity of diversity and inclusion in the 21st century. In fact, I think he's writing his dissertation somewhere in this arena. We've been supporting him to get that done. So it's Dr. Fred Jefferson. I can't wait for that. Today, we're going to talk about using curiosity to foster relationships, intimate and otherwise. And the reason I love to have Fred to talk about this conversation is I've never seen or met anyone who has been able to lead a group of people and get them to talk like Fred. It's astounding what he's able to do with people from diverse backgrounds and get them together and actually having a conversation and relationships. So Fred, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here, Mark. Thanks.
So Fred, why is this subject so important to you?
It's important because in today's society, in the changing world we're in, especially here in the United States with the changing demographics, it's an imperative, I believe, that leaders, no matter where you are, no matter where you sit, you have to understand who you are as a human being, who you are as a racialized human being, and your impact on others. And so when I think about curiosity, when I think about this idea of noticing what's going on in me, how the other is impacting me, and how my decisions about who they are and who they're becoming are influenced by everything that I do, then I, as a leader, I need to understand my own racial identity and how it intersects with those that are in front of me.
You know, I love that subject, and I don't think it's just for quote unquote leaders. I think everybody, because the racial conversation and diversity in this country is such a charged topic with immigration and people of all races, all colors, all nationalities, the ability to have a conversation has been really tough for all of us. The younger people, I think, are having an easier time than the people in midlife, where some of us come from certain parts of the country where we were integrated with all kinds and all flavors of people, and we still have trouble understanding. As soon as someone says the word white privilege, or as soon as someone talks about the anxiety of people of color that they live with every day, the conversation, I think, splits because we have such different experiences. So when you say understanding where someone else is coming from, I think that works in an intimate relationship and it works on a societal level.
Well, I agree with you. And I think one of the most important things here as we're thinking about this idea of curiosity and how these words, white privilege, racism, racist, right? All these trigger words, people have a hard time understanding the other, right? Because we get automatic defensiveness because of how we've had these conversations in the past. I call it the trauma of the race conversation.
Yeah, right.
And we've all had them where it actually splits us apart instead of brings us together. And so one of the things,
even when we have good intentions,
absolutely. And so it's, how do you hold on to that concept? How do you hold on to this idea that the other that's in front of me has good intentions when things blow up?
So how do you do that?
I think it's about noticing self first, noticing what's going on in me, and noticing when I get triggered. And so I use inquiry. Oh, isn't that interesting about what's going on and what I'm feeling in this moment? And then using that moment to reveal myself to the other.
What do you mean by inquiry?
Inquiry, it's just a constant questioning about, and asking myself, well, I've got this feeling. What's that about? What is that feeling? Where is it coming from? Who am I protecting? What am I protecting? And
that's a good one. What am I protecting? Why am I? If I'm starting to feel defensive, it means I'm protecting something in myself. And it takes, I think, a lot of maturity and a lot of deep breathing to be able to actually feel and listen to that.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you talked about the deep breathing piece, because that's, and I see your poster over there. It says breathe. And that's when I'm feeling defensive, that's one of my go-to mechanisms. And so when I'm in front of a group, I'm in front of others, I have to remind myself to take that breath.
Yeah, that conversation about breathing, that's for me, if you're breathing from your chest, you're just in slight fight or flight, and your ability to be in relationship is lessened, because when you're in fight or flight, you can only fight, run, or hide, and that's what your body is looking for. So if you take the time to deep breathe into your belly, it slows your physiology down, and it gives you the opportunity to open up enough to be in relationship with another person, and then to have the self-inquiry that you're talking about, and then to listen to another person and try and get their world.
Right. And so I use breathing to really get my head back online. Right. I breathe and say, and I let you know if I'm having a discussion with you, hey, I'm offline right now. I'm really not thinking in my best in my best way. Can we take a minute and breathe together to come back online?
So you're at a cocktail party. People
Mm-hmm.
aren't going to breathe together at a cocktail party. Maybe you and I can get someone to breathe with us, but most people aren't going to breathe together. But if you're in a conversation and you're feeling yourself triggered in a cocktail party, what do you do?
Well, no one needs to know that I'm taking an extra
Right.
breath.
I'm talking about saying, hey, let's breathe together.
But I think what you do is you can always pause. You can always take a break, and say, just a minute, Mark. I'll be right back. I just need to go get a glass of water, right? Or whatever the cocktail is that you feel comfortable with. But just taking the pause, finding spaces to pause is probably the number one best tool, technique that you can use, no matter where you are.
And then make sure you go back.
And
If
go
you take
back.
that break, go back and jump into the conversation.
Absolutely. If you're triggered, if you're overwhelmed, if you're feeling that you can't connect, take a break.
Okay, so you lead groups of people in learning how to do this on a professional level.
Yeah.
Because organizations are dealing with this constantly on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders are trying to figure out how to lead their organizations to be better at inclusion, and really find the gifts of diversity. And then they find themselves in this landmine. Can you give me an example of a conversation or a topic where you've helped people unravel that?
Sure. I was teaching a unconscious bias course, and I had a
And
number
what's unconscious bias?
unconscious biases are those biases that we have that affect our decision making, but we don't even know it. Somewhere back here, some bias that we learned from our childhood and are still carrying with us and affecting how we make decisions for ourselves and for others, and that maybe influence. For instance, um, we may be carrying biases against women, right? And thinking that women can't do a certain activity because we think that's a man's world, and so we might hire all men as a result of that bias, and not even have the curiosity to think about and look and notice, well, who's on my team, right? And why have I chosen all men, or why have I chosen, you name the group? There's probably some sort of bias going on here. And so what we want to do is we want to just raise our awareness to it, so that our unconscious, it becomes conscious, and then hopefully we can actually do something about it.
Okay, so you're teaching
So
unconscious bias.
so I'm teaching a course on unconscious bias, and there was an interaction between a white man and a black woman. And the interaction was about, they had the same job, and the white man said, well, all you have to do is show up in your uniform and exude confidence, and you'll be okay. And the black woman's response was, that's not true. You can do that, and I can exude the same types of behavior, the same exact phrasing, and people are going to interact with me differently. And in that moment, what was beautiful was not there was difference, but what I did was to intervene in that moment and say, wait a minute, let's not lose the connection, right? Let's not lose the ability to believe each other's story, right?
How'd you
he
do that?
had he had a story and she had a story, and I said, let's listen to each other in that. But the first thing that happened was that we laid the groundwork early, right? We said, this is how we're going to interact with each other. And we spent a good half hour to an hour as a group discussing what our group norms are going to be, how are we going to interact with each other in conflict. And the number one rule was believing the other's story the first time. And that allowed
So
me.
when you believe someone else's story, you don't have to believe that that's the absolute truth of reality, that their version of reality is true or your version of reality is true. You're just getting their story, what world they look at, what they see when they look out in the world. Because you
Yeah,
have your own story, which may or may
right,
not be true.
right. And so the where we get stuck, and whether it's cocktail party or in the classroom, is the defensive I call it the default space of, that can't possibly be true, because that if that were true, that would interfere with my belief about how the world works,
Hmm.
right? And if we get stuck there, we'll never connect. And so that's why I spend a lot of my time in the classroom saying, number one, we believe each other's story. We believe in positive intent of the other. And if we can do that, then we can start having connection. So I watched this connection between this white man, 65 years of age, and this 20 something black woman really share each other's experience and talk about, well, what is that experience? And that was something that they would have never had the
And
opportunity.
what was the result?
The result was both parties going, wow, I never thought about how hard it is for you, and or I never thought about how easy it is for you to be able to go into a different country, and just through the positivity of your presence make an impact and get things done, right? And so then the question would said, so how do we partner?
So now they can learn from each other.
Exactly. How do we partner knowing these two realities exist in the same work environment that we've experienced together, but experienced it differently? So now all of a sudden there's a conversation around partnering rather than just do what I do and you'll be okay.
Dude, I teared up at that. That's such a, it's such a hard thing to do. And every day you create miracles and bridges between people, which I have said in a million times is your mission in life. So, all right. So let's go Democrat, Republican. How do we have that conversation? How do we, go to somebody's backyard party, and one's a liberal, one's a conservative, air quotes.
That's, I think, probably.
And we've both been scared by our news media. We both believe our own news media, so we're both in our corners, and we both think it's life and death that the other views are wrong. And we both have the proof.
Yeah, so you're trying to make this hard on me.
Yeah, I'm trying to make this hard, and I'm trying to, you're one of the few people I trust.
Well, I think it goes back to relationship, right? And if you're in a backyard party, you probably have some sort of relationship with that person. And if you don't have a relationship, you might want to consider just talking about the weather.
So in other words, check to see if there's a basis for a relationship first before you go into a debate.
Absolutely. Oh, that's an interesting comment that you just made. The word debate. This conversation that we're talking about isn't a debate. It's a dialogue.
Nice distinction.
And there's a big difference for me, and that is with dialogue, we're entering the conversation with respect and wanting to learn from the other,
And nobody needs
rather
to win.
rather
Oh
than
man,
winning.
that's such a great distinction. I look at it as debate. I got to make my points. I got to show them that I'm right. And what you're saying is we're just having a conversation to find out about somebody else's world before we ever get into any other conversation.
Right? Because I find that there's rightness in the other, and that's what I'm in search of. Right? What are you right about from my story, from my space? And if we can go there, then we can actually start to learn from
So
from
so
each other.
so what questions do you ask? Because you're in this situation a lot. What questions do you ask people?
So what's important for you to live your life in the fullest manner? Right? What are those key values? Right? And usually what happens is people talk about their family. They talk about financial security. They talk about wanting educational experiences that bring out the best in them, right? I'm like, oh, guess what? Me too, right? So I'm
And
always.
that's interesting because a lot of all these things are universal things we agree on. No matter what particular political or racial persuasion you are, we agree on those things. And then it's the people who profit from us finding different ways to get to those things, or who to blame why we're not getting them, is the problem. So if we can actually say, you know what, we both want our families to be happy and healthy, we both want education to be accessible and usable, we both, that's a great way to find a bridge.
So if you find the bridge first, and then start having the conversations around the how, right? I think the angle in which we go at these big sticky problems is part of the issue, right? And so we think of each other as the enemy, but if we can start thinking of each other as having some common ground, the mutual respect, then we can start to figure out the how and start bridging the gap, because how we do things has an impact on the other, and we don't pay enough attention to those impacts,
Mm,
right? We're just paying attention to the results rather than, oh, who might I be hurting with this policy,
mm.
right? It sounds good, right? When we first think about a educational policy, we don't often think about the ramifications of that policy and how it's not equitable for everyone. It, I got mine, so therefore I'm good, right? But the question is, how do we open up our our minds a little bit more to say, who else is being impacted, and how are they being impacted, and is there another way?
I think the biggest part is, can you see them as human beings the same as you? Because I think the otherizing of people makes it easier to create policies and to dismiss the impact on other communities, because they're just other. And then when they're other, you put I will put um, um, characteristics on them that are different than mine, give them reasons for why they're not as economically viable, or why their education isn't as viable. And I think, again, can you see that they're the same as you, same feelings, same wants, family, economic security, health, happiness, all that stuff.
Yeah. I was just thinking about one of the questions that you had asked earlier is about the how of connecting with people across difference, right? And one of the things that I do, and one of the traps that I get caught up in is what how you framed the conversation earlier, this idea of debate,
Mm.
right? And one of the things that I get caught up in is um, wanting to have the perfect statement, right? So much, and I'm an introvert, so I craft all these ideas inside my head, and then I recognize, oh, I'm not listening to the other person because I'm ready. I'm
Mm.
trying to ready my response, and into so when I'm in that space, one of the things that I try to do is one, notice it, and then the second is I'm really trying to find that quotable quote, right? I'm searching for, and so I fine tune my brain to listen closely so that I can remember what you say. I can remember and perhaps write down in my journal pages what it is that I learned from you. So I use,
So you're paying attention so acutely that you'll be able to repeat what someone said to you that you learned from them, from their world.
yeah, that's what I try to do, and I would pass that on to others as a tool, as a technique to how do you connect cross difference. And it's really about paying attention. If someone said, well, what did Joe say about diversity and inclusion, I can spit that back out to you because I was listening closely to what Joe was saying.
That's brilliant. You know, this conversation is so important because my partner and I have different political views, sharply different political views. And when we have conversations, it gets really clear that we live in different worlds. We see, you know, we look at the same thing and see something completely different. So there's no way we're going to actually come to an agreement that, you know, this is, I see blue, you see red, and we're not going to be able to change that. So how do we bridge that, you know, that we live in two different worlds? And I made a decision a long time ago, because this almost tore us apart. It almost actually tore apart a very loving and very important relationship for me. And what I learned was that he always felt attacked by me. Now I'm the loving, you know, friendly neighborhood guru, as I'm dubbed. So, you know, everything about me is love and peace and inclusion and all that stuff. And the person I love most in the world is feeling attacked by me. And then when my son has different political views of me, he says he notices me attacking my son. So I'm like, wow, I'm going on the attack. I'm not, and you know, I have friends like you. I'm enlightened, and I'm still so scared. And I noticed that for me, it's fear. That fear comes up when someone has a different view that I view as dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me to learn to breathe and to listen has been the best practice. It saved my relationship and how to just figure out where we agree. And we agree on so much. Politics, no, but the underlying things that we want, like you said, health, well-being of our family, connection, you know, the environment, you know, we all want clean water and clean air. How do we get there is a different story. And that's been a revelation. So this conversation that you're having is not only for organizations, it's for, yeah, and not only for friends, it's for intimate relationships also.
Absolutely. I mean, I love the blue and the red of you and your partner, and because that has the opportunity, and when you mix those two colors, you get this beautiful purple, right? And so what are those opportunities to truly integrate difference? And that's the power, right? When we think about diversity and inclusion, whether it's in the workplace or an intimate relationship, it's about joining. It's about coming together and creating something that has never been done before.
Purple, we didn't even plan that. That is the
Right?
whole point of inclusion and diversity, is to create purple. It's to create something that hasn't been there before, this whole melting pot.
Yeah. Right. And so how do we do that? How do we join? And it's not easy.
Why do you care
Right?
about this?
Why do I care? I think care comes from pain. The pain of experience, of the experience of being the other, being seen as the other, as the pain of having a cross burned on our lawn when I'm 4 years old.
So you're 4 years old, but your father's a college professor.
Yeah.
Right. So your father's a college professor, part of the community, and you had a cross burned on your
Absolutely.
lawn.
Yeah. And so I
So someone
know.
would look at you, educated, coming from an educated family, and never know that that's in your experience and that's how you come to life. Nobody, unless they got your world, unless they asked you questions, they would never know that.
That's true. Right. While that experience was real and painful, and as a 4-year-old, I didn't know the meaning, but I do believe that it was a crucible moment for me, as I look back and think about how did we survive that? How did my mom and my father, my aunt who was there, how did they all decide to stay? How do you stay in an environment where you're unwelcome, where your children are in danger?
Mm.
And yet I look back on that and I realized that it was love and connection, right? That event was just an event. It was a blip in our experience. I don't want to diminish it, but it was love and connection and relationship that kept us loving that experience. That living in Horseheads, New York, is one of the best childhood memories that I have.
And you go back all the time. You bring your children, your family centers there, and even with the harsh winters, nobody's moved to Florida.
So that was a formidable experience, and to watch and to relive that experience through stories of asking my parents, well, what was that experience like? How did you do that?
Mm.
Is still helping me to understand the why I do what I do.
Wow.
Right. And that there wasn't a bitterness that happened. There was an opening, and to witness and hear about how the students all marched from Corning Community College into Corning to demand change, in the community of that college, to rally with us. It was just
right. So a couple of bad actors shows a whole community of loving people, mm-hmm. which is really kind of beautiful. So last question, out of left field, and maybe overstepping. What's the topic of your dissertation?
My topic is it changes a little bit, but it's really about helping African American leaders understand the nature of how ancestral DNA knowledge impacts their leadership. So it's really about leadership and racial identity. What's that nexus? What does that mean? And is it different when you understand where you come from, as far as the DNA helping you to get past that, what I call the black hole of slavery, right? So science is now helping us to take this time in history, right, and not making a defining space, but just a spot in the journey and evolution of the African diaspora.
Great. So what I'm going to ask you as a personal favor, and it's going to be on this podcast, evergreen forever, is please write your dissertation, because the world needs your gifts and your healing and your unique voice. Well, so what are you excited for next?
I'm really excited about the next cohort of the leadership coaching certificate program.
So great. This is where you get to advertise.
All right. The leadership coaching certificate program is a 6-month coaching program that's part of the University of Rochester, Jefferson Associates, and the Rammerman Leadership Group. And what we focus on is um, three three pillars that we believe that all leaders in the 21st century need.
And what
One,
are they?
one, it's an understanding of social justice. Two, it's true understanding of leadership, but more importantly, leadership as it relates to one's own racial identity. And then the idea is coaching, is being able to ask powerful questions, being able to sit in relationship with the other in a way that continues to grow both the coach and the coachee. And so those are our three pillars in which we help leaders grow, develop, and become.
That's incredible. We're going to put the link in the show notes for that. I have seen the results firsthand of that coaching program, and I kind of roll my eyes and yawn at most coaching programs. And this is the real deal. This particular program, and the people who come out of it are changing the world. So I urge you to go do some research on that. Fred, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your brilliance and your gifts. Thank you for your friendship.
Thank you, Mark.
And to everybody else, thank you for taking this ride along with us. If you really took it to heart, there's some painful and difficult stuff to do in order to be able to heal some of the bridges that need to be repaired. I love you, and have a great rest of the day.